Well, good Sunday morning to you. I hope you didn't mind taking a little extra minute there while I got a few things squared away. I was trying to set the stream up properly so that we could just go right into it. And I've got a fun day today planned, looking at science fiction, but not just science fiction, some science fiction, a little bit of fun, just general purpose, interesting topics, I hope. And I'm just going to make sure real quick, for those of you watching, let me know. Hey, Barry, thank you. That's what I was looking for. Are we sounding okay? Everything looking good? Just want to make sure that everything is working before I dive into today's topics and see if anybody has any opening comments before we get going. And I knew that if yesterday I didn't realize that we had a lot of back chatter going on, so I didn't want to slam people with a bad experience again today. So I'm going to go ahead and just, while we're getting started, and thank you, Kitten, I appreciate that. That's what I was looking for. What I'm going to do is just share a quick link. Because now I'm expanding a little bit, trying to get some of the content that I'm presenting here out to LinkedIn. And I have a pretty large network of folks that over the years have connected with me on LinkedIn. And I just want to be able to kind of open up some of what I'm talking about to that network because, it's I'm not trying to dilute what we have going on here because this is fantastic and I want to keep it going as a small community. And you guys supporting me is everything. But I do want to see us actually grow the audience a little bit. So, some of the interaction can become a little bit more fun and interesting over the years, over the months and years ahead that I do this. Anyways, I'm just going to pop this over. It'll only take a second. Today's theme is Sci-Fi Sunday. So there we go. That's out. And I should actually copy the same thing over to locals. So let's do that one quickly. And then I'll stop doing all the back end. I've got to create a script that does this in the background. So I'm not there yet, but getting there. So we'll see. We'll see what I can get automated in the future. Some of the reason that I don't have all this stuff yet automated is because I'm still learning the ropes on what I'm doing in a way, and I want to make sure that we're not dealing with things that are putting us in that's LinkedIn. No, that's not what we want. I just realized the link that I created over on LinkedIn is actually a link to LinkedIn, which is kind of ridiculous. So let me do that and change this to that. There we are. There. Now it's, I hope, let's give it 1 second here. One way or the other, I'll end up having somebody else do this for me. Either my partner, my son, in this. He's been helping to chase things down in the background. There we go. And it still doesn't have the right link, even though I changed it, unless it's changing it. Yeah, I think that's because it's a LinkedIn link. Sorry about that. It's a weird thing, but it seems to be working. Okay, I've posted my links on different things. Let's see. I do have that muted, and I'm not getting double talk as we're ready. Sorry for all of the fuss. So, yeah, and I do want it to grow too, Kitten. Thank you. Yeah, I want to be able to. One of the reasons that I do this is When you are able to let yourself think without constraint and just expand your consciousness, expand your mind a little bit, you can have a lot of fun mentally, going through some hoops and whatnot, and, potentially get that's because we're on all. There we are. So you can potentially get, you can have like little incremental thoughts and good thoughts, right? But I'm trying to do something. I've got a research paper. Well, it's not a paper. It's just a thing I'm researching right now that I'm hoping I can turn into something of a paper, and it really comes down to talking about compounding. So we talk about compounding interest, and if you understand compounding interest, you understand that things build on each other, and we have rules for it and how it works in finance. And there's a kind of a fixed rate of return that individuals get when they enter the game. But the actual rate of return is actually much higher, even though we don't see it. And that's because the bankers hide that. They have to, because that's the only way they make any money. And the same thing goes in energy and intelligence. So when we invest in certain ways, the leaps and the bounds of our intelligence grow based on how deep we dive into one or two different topics, and then it grows and grows and grows. And the same thing, we have the conservation of energy prevents direct compounding in energy. So you have a fire, you're not going to get anything direct. But when you put it into a system and you have a feed of fuel, then you actually get compounding, a feedback loop, if you will, that will actually increase the output, the overall output. So while it isn't a perfect analogy, it's not really an analogy. It's not a perfect one-to-one correlation between how compounding interest works and compounding energy works, or compounding intelligence works. But one of the very interesting things is how compounding of biology works. And when you think about this is brilliant. So when one sperm meets one egg, it doubles and doubles and doubles and doubles, which is why we end up with a child, right? So you have this compounding it has limits. It has to have some level of limits, because if it didn't have limits, the consumption factor of the child would kill the mother. Truly, if you think about it, it would take all the nutrients and grow exponentially until the mother died, because the mother wouldn't be able to consume enough fast enough to be able to feed the child, right? But think about plants. As long as you put sunlight and fertilizer in the soil and provide reasonable conditions for that plant to grow, the first thing that happens is the seedling pops up. It gets one leaf. Now it collects energy with that one leaf. And then another leaf. Now it's doubling its energy. And then you get 5 leaves. Now it's 5 times, and so on. And keeps growing and growing until you have an upper limit of whatever that plant can support. It couldn't support unlimited growth any more than a mother and a child could, because when you reach that certain limit, you end up potentially, the limbs of the tree would fall, right? It wouldn't, the weight bearing aspect of the central trunk and the branches would actually destroy the tree. So there's these built-in limits within all of the things that we have of compounding. Now, money, I don't know, that's a mathematical formula. So that has a theoretical infinity, but who knows? Now, intelligence is another one. So intelligence is where you have multiple disciplines coming together. You start off and getting deep in one topic, and then when you get deep in the second topic, the crossover between the two is a pollination of sorts that actually can cause whole new disciplines, like 5 disciplines can come out of 2 things that you know. So all of these compounding factors are kind of going to be a thread over the next 3 to 5 days for some of the things that I intend to talk about. So it's going to be Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Plant babies in soil. That would be interesting, wouldn't it? If we could do that. So, and hopefully our pod will grow in the same manner, right? The more people that join the pod, more people that join this, the more people will bring together some interesting ideas, and maybe we'll grow beyond a certain point. So, and I'm going to say it now before we run into a problem. All of you listening on locals, no problem. Just remember the 30-minute mark. So I started about 5 minutes past the hour because I was trying to tweak a few things and get a few things locked in before I joined. But there's the 30-minute cutoff. So somewhere between 11:30 Eastern Standard Time and 11:35 or so, you're going to want to hop over to YouTube. But I also would encourage you to consider doing that anywhere along the line. Don't wait, because you don't want to get cut off. I don't want you to get cut off. And I don't want to, have you just disappear, because I am paying attention to the chat and trying to, chat with you, to talk to you all. So if whether you're on YouTube or locals, I'll still be able to see the chat. So don't worry. You can join the chat on YouTube. You can join the chat on, I think only YouTube. Oh, Rumble. Rumble also has a chat that feeds into this. So any one of those platforms, you can grab this stream and then join the chat, and we can keep moving. So let's talk about today. Today is Sunday. I thought I started today off having my first cup of coffee, and I don't know if this is your first cup of coffee, but right now we are at the second sip. So let's do a quick rundown. If you have joined the second sip, and you would like, just grab a cup or a mug, a glass, a tankard, chalice, or a stein, a canteen, jug, or a flask, a vessel of any kind. Put your favorite liquid in it. I like coffee. And then join me now in the unparalleled pleasure, the dopamine hit of the day, the thing that makes everything better, the simultaneous sip. It happens now. Go. So, what happened is this. I'm sitting in my chair downstairs, and I'm drinking my first cup of coffee, and I'm thinking to myself, well, what am I going to talk about today? And I have a technique for coming up with ideas. It's not that complicated at all, but it has a lot to do with this whole intelligence compounding perspective. I read a book. And today is going to be a lot about people and authors. So we'll be talking a bunch of about a bunch of different things. So first and foremost, I started late in life. Okay, and what I mean by that is, when I got out of my high school years, I didn't graduate with my class. I had a weird circumstance because I moved midway through my high school career, where the schools, even though I was in a Massachusetts school, and the educational value, the content that I was learning in that school was way above where I went to. The school I went to did not recognize my grades and some of my classes, so I couldn't graduate with my class, which was humiliating at 17 and a half, going on 18. And I was struggling because I'm like, what the heck am I going to do with myself? I can't go to college if I don't have my high school diploma. I just got out of, I had a plan to go to school, but that plan just went right out the window because of a random grading situation between the two schools. So because of that, I didn't know what to do. I worked my way through a summer, made a lot of money doing some really mundane things. And then eventually I reached a point where it was a summer job, and the summer ended, and all of that money that I was making went away, and I had to make a different decision now at the end of the summer. It's like I went from making close to $1,000 a week down to making $40 a week. And again, another humiliation. It's like, okay, when are we going to stop humiliating Dave, right? So I decided at that point, I don't care what it takes. I'm going to do what I want to do. And I went and I joined the military. And my recruiter and a local principal got together, and they allowed me to go back to school for a couple of months to finish off what was missing between the two schools, the transfer and everything. And I got my high school diploma from a school that I attended for a grand total of maybe 6 weeks. Crazy, but it worked out. I got my high school diploma shipped to me while I was in basic training because my recruiter said, you're never going to get any rank if you don't at least have a high school diploma, so you better get your high school diploma. So he helped make those arrangements. I wish I knew his name. I would go back and give him the biggest hug. He was a wonderful guy. But a fabulous thing just to have somebody reach down into your life and change it and help you like that. But all of that came about. I didn't start college until, almost 10 years after I got out of high school. So my education was 10 years delayed for what the majority of people out there had. But I did have one benefit. I worked my butt off for that 10 years, between 7 years active duty in the military and a bunch of I would call failed careers because they were difficult to make any money beyond a certain threshold. They had this growth limit, just like all of these other things. And I said, I want to break out of that. I want to get into a higher level. So today is my kind of, this perspective is my thought on late starts. So I'm going to let Anthony tell his, let me start it over here, put the sound on and start it over.
Hi, everyone.
Because I want you to hear.
Well, here we are. Another happy new year coming up. Lots of cheer, lots of fun and all that. So really have a great time. Congratulations on reaching another year to all of you. My only problem was I had too good a time. Because 50 years ago today, I was nearly killed. I drive my car in a drunken blackout. That's the way it was. But I realized at that point that I was having too much fun. It was called alcoholism. So anyone out there who's got a little problem with having too much,
Sorry.
Check it out.
I wanted you to see this.
Because life is much better. So I stopped. Without bragging, I got help, and 50 years ago today was the end. And without being a killjoy, I just wish you well. Choose life instead of the opposite. Life, 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 and more life. I'm also going to be 88 in 2 days' time. So maybe I did something right, I don't know. Anyway, Happy New Year and a happy, happy life.
So the reason that I brought that up, it is not because I was an alcoholic or anything like that. It has to do with the fact that Anthony Hopkins' career didn't start until I think he was like 47 or even early 50s before he became the character that we know from Silence of the Lambs. And that was the beginning of his career really taking off, Is there, Barry, is there any WM? Hey there, WM. Are we still good or? Yeah, he's an amazing actor. And so the second part of it here is, this is just a little thing, but you see him dancing. He's 82 years old in this picture. And the way he put it is he's just out there because he made a good choice at a certain age. He was able to, overcome what was probably a pretty tough start to a career that ultimately, we know the output of his career now. We've seen it. So it's amazing to think. And really the reason that he's dancing with such, whatever you want to call it, joie de vivre, joy of life. I'm going to just read this. Now, he didn't quite go into this in his previous video, so I'm going to finish this. It goes a little deeper than what he did in that other video. So, I woke up driving on a highway in Arizona with no idea how I had gotten there. I was 37 years old. I wasn't Sir Anthony. I wasn't a movie legend. I was an unpleasant, angry, dangerous drunk who believed alcohol was the fuel for my talent. I drank because I felt like a fraud, a baker's son from Wales who didn't belong on the stage of London. That day in the desert, fear hit me harder than any hangover ever had. I could have killed someone. I could have killed myself. I walked into an AA meeting, and a woman asked me, why don't I trust God? And I didn't believe in God. But that day, I believed in the desperate need to not die. I have been sober for 48 years, and I traded the bottle for life. At 86 years old, I posted a video of myself dancing the rumba in my kitchen, wearing a floral shirt, making a complete fool of myself and laughing like a child. People say he's crazy. I say I'm alive. Don't believe that the lie that you need to destroy your life to create art. You don't need to suffer to be interesting. The real masterpiece is reaching old age and still wanting to dance on a Tuesday morning. And I saw that yesterday, and it captured me, and it just made me think that's a beautiful thing to start our Sunday off with. And it also, the inspiration to me on this one is the late start, right? I started 10 years late on my education, and I didn't start my career officially probably until I was in my early to mid 30s. So when a lot of other folks had already gone through and blown away all of their, they rode the coattails off of their college into a career and launched, I launched later. But what's interesting is because I launched later, I had insights that because I worked in the world and experienced certain things, I had insights that a lot of the college educated folks that I was working with had no idea about. They had never experienced some of the things I had experienced, hadn't gone through multiple different types of business as an employee or even a small business owner. And because they had never experienced those things or the desperation, like when I was a small business owner early on, I had a construction company in Hawaii briefly. I mean, when I say briefly, I mean like for 6 weeks. It was that quick. And the reason it was that quick is this guy hired me to paint kitchen cabinets. And he said, I'm going to pay you $600. And I said, that's great, right? You know, and now I'm going to go paint these kitchen cabinets. And at the end of the day, he said something like, well, I said, why are you going to pay me now instead of after the work? And he says, well, here's how it works. If you don't do a good job, I'll just never hire you again, right? And so that was reality, right? And good morning, Barry. Oh, good. I'm glad to see you too. We're actually just... So anyways, the construction company, I painted these kitchen cabinets with latex paint. I didn't know anything about paint. I didn't know anything about kitchen cabinets or that I should have pre-sanded. So after everything was dry, you could just take a fingernail like this and the paint would peel right off. I never got employed by that guy again. And because I was 22 and I had no clue, right? And then the second thing that I did is I started to, I had a thing that they had in-unit dryers in this apartment building that I was living in. And the venting was horrible in most cases. So in other words, you would be kind of sending the lint right into your house. So I got a big old cement saw and I started drilling holes into the cement to ventilate, and it worked great. It was actually not a big deal. I didn't know that there was plumbing in the cinder blocks in some cases. Now, I never broke anything, so it was never a problem. But I got yelled at, and that ended. So within 6 weeks, my painting career, cabinet painting career, and my cinder block drilling careers both ended abruptly, and I said, I'm done, right? At that point, that's when I started taking college classes saying, I gotta fix whatever's going on up here because it's not panning out into a reproducible money stream. So all of those things came down to me trying to understand how to have a better vision for the future. And that goes to our next quick little clip here. And
right now,
this is
on a piece
another
of
one that
paper,
I'm going
you cannot write down
here real quick. It's
You
pretty short.
cannot write down right now on a piece of paper, this is what I want. If you can't list them, this is what I want. then you can't have it. Because your mind will get for you what you want, but you have to feed it a vision of what you're looking for. It's always interesting because the function of the mind is to make coherence between your belief and your reality. If I believe it's not going to work, then the function of the mind will manifest in a situation where it doesn't work. If I totally believe this is how it's going to work, then my mind will set me up in a situation where it works that way. And all of a sudden, that's when you start to realize, wait a minute, it's not chance anymore. This isn't chance. This is creativity. And we are creators. You cannot write.
So that is kind of the vision behind why I'm sitting here in front of you. To be a creator, to be somebody who makes something, to have a vision for something. And that's kind of where this picture comes in. Whoever made that snow scene had a vision, and they were able to pull something off that the neighbors commented about for quite a while, apparently. So my visions are a little bit, I don't have a completely crystallized vision of where I'm going with the stream or how it's going to pan out long term. That I'm not even worried about it, because one thing I know is that you have to start. You have to begin before you can have any kind of growth that is sustainable or that is something you can do something useful with long term. So that's where I want to kind of go today. And what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about how some of the biggest authors that are out there have their circumstance is where they got with their stories, where they got with their science, is because there was cross-pollination between all of their different disciplines. So let me just move this over a little bit. There we go. That way I can talk to what's on the right over here. So first, you've heard me mention it probably a few times, talking about the Kardashev scenario. And Nikolai Kardashev was a Russian inventor. He actually came up with the Kardashev scale, which has to do with how big is your universe? How big is the energy production capacity or capability of your universe? And for whatever reason, that image just doesn't want to render. But it's okay. I'll just explain it on the screen here. So there we go. So, planetary level, stellar level, galactic level, universal, multi-universal, and so on. Now, whether or not any entity, it would have to be a God that transcends all of those, right? God level intellect, God level creature that can actually span all of those levels. Here on Earth, one of the things that we've discovered is you can't, you cannot completely capture the energy of the Earth the way that this actually talks about, because you'd end up destroying and consuming the Earth. And we've got to live on this planet, at least at this stage, right? There's no way we can survive without our planet all long term. So the Kardashev principle that you harness the energy of your planet, then you harness the energy of your sun. I actually think that what's really going to happen in this scenario is there's a thread that runs through it. So there's a thread where we harness some of the energy of our planet, and then we harness some of the energy of our sun, and we harness some of the energy of our galaxy. And it has to be small enough scale that it doesn't destroy everything that's out there, and also maintain the planet that we live on so that we don't just die, right? So there have been a number of folks who have spent time trying to rethink how to get to those levels. And part of what I didn't get my thought of this thread running through it as a equivalent to what they're talking about. My thought is, you build enough momentum from the first level that you can get at least a finger hold on a second level. and then you build enough energy on the second level to reach into the third level. So it may only be a tiny, tiny fraction of what, as Elon says it, we would be 1/millionth of the output of the sun just at Kardashev level 1. If we were able to harness all the energy, all of the capacity of the Earth, that would be 1/millionth of what the sun is capable of providing. So what that means is, if we can kind of leap into Kardashev level 2 with enough equipment to get us started on Kardashev level 2, maybe we reach 999,000th of the sun, and that will dwarf the power of Kardashev level 1. Even just one millionth, one less millionth than what we can do in harnessing Earth's power could be the next level, and it'll blow away all of the energy capacity that we have here on Earth already. So we don't have to go into the full-scale Kardashev theory. Now, the reason that I bring that up has to do with some of the discussions around what is a Kardashev swarm, and actually, let me do it the other way, because this will keep us in scope. Okay, so Kardashev, the Kardashev theory has some interesting outcomes. So when you first look at how this works, the full-blown capture of Kardashev level 2 is a Dyson sphere. A Dyson sphere completely encloses the sun and captures all of its output. Probably not possible. We probably don't even have enough mass in our own solar system to create a shell that goes completely around the sun and captures all of its energy. It just probably is impractical. But this is where the compounding starts to happen. We've got Kardashev inspiring and discussing or having a conversation with Dyson for the Dyson sphere, and eventually maybe the Dyson swarm. The Dyson swarm is where we pull one thread. We can have just a small segment of a swarm, and we reach less than 1/1,000,000th of the sun's output. So now we get into the intelligence scale. So intelligence, same concept. We are, what are we at, about 7 billion, 8 billion people on a planet? Each one of us is 1/8 billionth of all of the intelligence on this planet. Doesn't matter how much smarter you are than the person next to you, all of our brains put together include just you being one of those brains. Our complete compute output is actually higher than anything we can do right now on a computer, with computers in general, until probably we go to 2 or 3 times that 1/1,000,000th of energy production to be able to generate the compute power necessary to compete with all of the brains we have here on this earth. And whether or not your brain is trained or not trained, there's still compute power, which kind of leads us back to the Matrix discussion. But Frank Drake had an equation that was focused on trying to understand the possibility of detecting civilizations, maybe with the equivalent amount of compute that we have, and also detecting whether or not there was something like a Dyson sphere or a Dyson swarm or energy collection on the scale that Kardashev is talking about anywhere in the universe. So he created this formula that we ultimately use to figure out things like the Fermi paradox. Why can't we see anybody out there? And then the second one, how do we build on what we know in order to get somewhere? So the only way for us to get into this higher level thought pattern is to really go, and by the way, if you have, it's probably too late, but jump over to YouTube if you haven't. But anyways, a Dyson swarm, this is what if you tried to build a Dyson swarm just from satellites and not a full-blown sphere, the gravity of the sun would eventually change the orbits dynamically unless you had power. But then if you had power, you wouldn't be able to keep the satellites exactly where you need them to be, because the power you collect from them is being used for compute, not for navigation. And as a result, these satellites would eventually do this. That they would end up putting the satellites in the same kind of configuration that the elliptical plane of all of our planets have. And in a way, this is kind of the same thing with intelligence. There's going to be, whatever the gravity that anchors all of our thoughts and all of our capabilities from an intelligence perspective. I don't know that it has a gravity effect for us to be able to capture all the intelligence that we have on this planet. I suspect it's going to go a little bit more like this, because the orderly process, the gravity that puts everything into this elliptic plane will probably have a similar effect on our thinking, and the ideas will cluster around a specific type of intelligence or a specific intelligence orbit, if you will. So this is me speculating. I'm just having fun with the thought process here. So here's a guy that took that to the next level. He was writing prolifically back at the same time that the Kardashev theory was being developed, at the same time that Dyson was proposing the Dyson swarm, and at about the same time that Frank Drake was talking about this equation for intelligence. So all of these things are starting to come together when Larry Niven began his writing career. And when you actually look at the scope of all of the things that Larry Niven just kind of opened his brain and said, let it in. And he created a number of, first off, he created worlds, right? The very first worlds that he created, they're just traditional worlds, and we visited them. So he had some pretty, like visiting a neutron star and things like that. Now, the ring world was probably one of the first massive scale ideas that he had. This is a slightly more practical version of the Dyson sphere, and practical in a sense that you only have so much mass in orbit around a planet, or around a sun, that is. All of the planets that are there, that mass can be converted into something. So he proposed that somebody stumbles across a star system where there's literally no clutter in orbit around this one particular star. The star was just burning in the middle of the night, and there was nothing anywhere close, and except for the ring around that planet, around that star. Sorry. So the star had this ring completely around it, and it had a set of tiles on the inside loop that actually created a day-night kind of thing that a planet dweller would need, because their biology was probably built on a day-night rotation based on all planets. So this thing was 1 million miles across. The depth of it was enough to keep the atmosphere in, and the centripetal force actually held the atmosphere into this thing. So it was open on top, and you could literally like parachute in from space, but you couldn't. You would land on the ground, and the atmosphere was kept in simply by the rotation speed. So this thing, in order for the atmosphere to be stuck in there, it had to be spinning around the sun in something of the neighborhood of like 1 million miles an hour, ridiculously fast, right? So the engineering behind something like this would have to be ridiculously amazing, because just think of the stresses that you would have, something being thrown apart while it's being rotated at 1 million miles an hour. The strength of the materials would have to be staggering. And this is, again, why the Kardashev swarm makes more sense than the Kardashev or the Dyson sphere or even the ring world. But like I said, Larry Niven was learning and growing with all of these ideas. Now, one of the other worlds that he postulated was maybe a nebula surrounding a sun that didn't have yet the rocky planet formation going on, that there could be a breathable atmosphere potentially, or you could induce a breathable atmosphere around one of those suns. So there was a torus, donut-shaped kind of nebula going on around a sun, and a civilization actually helped to shape that to a degree. And then they had these trees that would rotate inside that atmosphere, and the trees became kind of the ground for the people that lived there. And again, it was another civilization of sorts that was crafted by some engineering miracle that allowed people to live there. And then the people that lived there had gone back to nomadic level lifestyles, because the science that built it was biological to a degree in nature. And, the trees, in order to give the rotation so that one end had gravity, they actually had engines here that rotated the trees to get that gravity going. So it was, another brilliant, interesting, like blow your mind expansion of like, how did this come about? What a great idea. And again, this is where the thing that kind of jumped my brain into this whole topic of the integral trees, even this whole conversation, is I saw this today. And this is an infusion of metal into wood. Apparently what they did is they inserted metal into the materials, into the natural grain with wood. Ultimately what this is about is the finish of it. But it made me think about trees that could be structurally strong. And then that reminded me of a story written in the 60s or 70s called that story was written in probably in the 80s to 90s, the integral trees. But that's what got me on this whole topic, was this picture of this block of wood that is metal infused. So, and it's just kind of interesting because all of these ideas like spark new ideas, and they create like this, for Larry Niven, he was able to generate these amazing worlds mentally, picture the worlds. And then when he pictured the world, he said, well, how does somebody live there, right? And then eventually he said, well, what about our whole area of space that we can reach within, a specific speed, following, assuming we have light speed travel or close to light speed travel, how close could we get? So how many star systems could we eventually potentially connect with? So in that process, he created this thing called the universe of known space. So it's just a small little cluster, very similar to Star Trek, right? Very small corner of the galaxy. Maybe whether we infuse metal into redwood trees is going to be, I don't know if we could infuse metal into a tree without killing it. That's the big problem, I think. But yeah, I mean, just imagine though, because there is another book that I read on this one. Imagine if somebody were to put a rocket booster on a redwood tree, take it out of the ground and lift it into orbit. And if you could infuse or can protect the cells from the vacuum of space and let the tree grow indefinitely, it could be pretty crazy, because gravity is the constraint for trees. If you got rid of the gravity constraint, put the tree in orbit, that tree could grow to massive size, assuming that you find biomaterial to feed it. You've got the sun right there. So think about how the Kardashev swarm could suddenly be a whole host of redwood trees that turn into moon-sized orbital satellites, kind of bringing us right into this story of the integral trees. Whether or not we're not likely to put an atmosphere in a torus around the sun, but yeah, it's an interesting idea. And then he broke out into all of these different, not just worlds. He came up with ship ideas, like one particular alien race had found impervious materials that could be used to. I know that would be amazing, wouldn't it? Especially if we could keep it alive. If we could actually keep it alive, the tree would be it would be astounding. Not just in orbit, but maybe in orbit around the sun, because like I said, if you could keep the food going into it and you could keep the sun's energy on it, what's the constraint for it to grow to something the size of the whole planet of Earth? Nothing, really. Assuming that the tree could absorb the radiation without dying, there's a lot of, and this other story that I was reading actually has trees that are ships, and it's a tree ship where basically they bring a tree like a redwood out into space, enclosed completely, so that it didn't kill the tree, but it let it grow, and this tree grew to like miles long, and then as a result, they contained it. Now you could live in and around the tree. We certainly could. We're as the land-bound apes, monkeys, whatever we are, the Homo sapiens that came from something like apes, gorillas, at least has a similarity in genetics, and then to have that as a ship enclosing the entire thing in an atmosphere so that it continues to grow, and then simply find a way to put an engine on the whole thing so that it could travel from one star system to another. It could be pretty crazy, pretty amazing. But there's science fiction stories where these ideas, these extrapolations, actually talk about that and have done that. And then they had some other stories about different species of aliens. And so Niven came up with some extraordinary alien species. I think the Kzinti, with these cat-like animals, are probably a little bit of the inspiration for Klingons from Star Trek. They had this amazing. They're extraordinarily warlike, and they have a couple of weapons that are just amazing. Like they could create an atom, a wire that is nothing but atoms strung together. So it's effectively invisible, and you could never see it. So they used it. You could lasso something or whip something with it, and because it's an atom thick, it would just sever whatever it was. So if you put your hand up and a loop of it went around your hand would just fall off, and you wouldn't even feel it because it was an atom length, atom width wire that just went through and severed everything. So sorry to bring a gory aspect to this, but that's one of the weapons that they used in their strategies, and humanity eventually ended up defeating them because they had they literally used something like the laser on the wall to distract the cats until they eventually got them. It's humorous how he decided to do it. But one of the other areas that he came up with an interesting character was an alien race where they have one massive arm on one side and two lightweight arms on the other. And this was more about, kind of that, I think, getting the lightsabers. It was called a Shigawire. But yeah, it definitely could be something along those lines. A lot less energy intensive than lightsabers, if you ask me. But this alien species, the idea they had the ability to have this massive arm so that they could grip and hold something, and then the two other arms could be used to tinker and build. So they were machine makers, like amazing machine makers, and they could evolve from like the smallest. They're literally like the AI robot that we talk about, the von Neumann probe, where you have aliens or robots that build robots that eventually could just swarm over a whole area. So they were restricted to their planet, not by laws or anything like that, but by the bizarreness of being right on the edge of a singularity, a black hole. They were never able to quite get out of their own way to, they would get tribal warfare going on, and they would collapse their, about every, 100 years or so, their entire civilization would collapse and it would rebuild itself from nothing and start over, and just kept going continuously looping like this. And they were intellectually brilliant, mechanically masterful, but because they lived next to a singularity, they couldn't get off their own planet, and they never had the imagination to get off their own planet because their civilization always collapsed before their intellect could reach a capacity to go beyond. Then humans find them, and they get out into the universe, and now they're like self-replicating, like on a planetary scale. And it's an interesting storyline, but all goes back to this whole concept of robots building robots and AI expanding itself and going so far beyond anything that we can do. And when I think about my process that I was saying at the very beginning about how I come up with ideas for things, I read a book series when I was, I'm going to say, probably 13, 14 in that age. It was Lord Fowle's Bane. It was the first book in the Thomas Covenant series, and it was Thomas Covenant, the unbeliever, who has a transportation from our mundane world, and he was a leper. And so because he had leprosy, he had to learn this very strict mental discipline in order to survive, because if he didn't pay attention, if he didn't do a visual survey of his extremities and find infection and deal with it instantly, the infection spreads and then he loses a finger, loses a hand, whatever. So in the story, he's a half hand. He has 3 fingers, 2 fingers and a thumb, but he's lost these 2 fingers to the leprosy. And because of that, his wedding ring, his wife left him. Symbolically, it was, a big struggle for him. And he had lost so much weight being so gaunt, he could wear his ring on his index finger. So, and it was white gold. And that apparently he gets into some strange accident, gets transported into this world where evil is personified and good is personified. And not only are they personified, they are actual magical forces in this universe. So now the reason that I'm even talking about this, I don't want to talk about the whole story, because if you've read it, it's wonderful. If you haven't read it, I will say that a lot of people take massive exception to the introductory chapter where Covenant, because he thinks he's in some kind of crazy fantasy world, he somehow loses control when his body starts healing and he rapes a woman, and he doesn't mean to, but it just happens. He's overcome. And it's like that. I agree. That was really a shitty way to start a story, pardon my language. But in that particular instance, it was the tick mark that proved that there was a personification of good and evil, and that it existed in everybody, and that everybody had this element in them. But the whole germ of the story, of that story, came about because, and the word germ is very specific and used in this context, because Stevenson, what was his first? It was oh goodness, I can't remember his name. Stevenson. He was author of Lord Fowle's Bane. That's the beauty of having this right here. Stephen Donaldson. Okay, there we go. So Stephen Donaldson he talks about his creative process, and he basically takes multiple ideas and smashes them together and see what comes out. So he smashes the ideas into each other, much the way we smash atoms together to create new atoms, to spark his creative process. And I read that early on, and it made me understand how to develop ideas and create new, interesting topics. And that's really what this whole perspective on today's, it's all of these things, that it started with this piece of wood, and this piece of wood led to the integral trees, which led to the ring world, which made me back up into the Dyson sphere, the Kardashev swarm, the idea of having a vision, even starting late. All of that came out of one thought, smashed into another thought. And that's actually Stephen Donaldson's creative process in how he created the series, the Thomas Covenant, the Unbeliever. Fantastic book series if you're ever interested in digging into a great fantasy with an interesting storyline. But I will tell you, like I said, if you are easily offended, the first paragraph or the first chapter is going to offend the heck out of you, and you're not going to like it. But if you can just get past that and allow the moral implications to be taken into the story and just read the story, first off, you'll find that he tortures himself through every single book over what happened. It was not like he has no remorse. So the character has horrible remorse over everything that happened and blames himself for everything throughout the entire series. So there is a redemption arc for the character, and the sadly, good and positive and negative. His the incident caused a change in other people in the story that brought them to both positive and negative ends. So it's a brilliant story, but and long. You got to get your dictionary out. He uses enormous words just for the fun of it, just to build a theme in the story. So if you like building your vocabulary, go read Stephen Donaldson. He's incredibly prolific and fantastically imaginative in his story, in his thinking. So now that, yes, like I said, it reveals the good and bad in us all. But what I really like about that story, about what's interesting, is it does reveal the good and bad in all of us, but it allows good and bad to crystallize. It literally is like our super far left and our super far right, where if you allow something to go to the extreme, you can see it crystallized or personified in the worst and the best. And then talks about the folly of the thinking of those far extremes. So there's one race in that story that is absolutely, the most powerful, and they're super good, against the most evil. Lord Fowl is the the name, on the evil side, right? So he allows the story to tell the extremes, and he eventually gets the good. The good are so good and so powerful that they become indifferent, and they're so amazingly powerful that they don't even consider anybody below them to even matter, right? And they're terrified of the main character because he has that ring that happens to be the source of wild magic that is like the keystone to the whole universe. So anyways, I didn't want to really tell that whole story because it's 6 books long. It's a brilliant series, but I was trying to talk about his creative process to bring that to life. And apparently the inspiration had to do with, he was in a restroom in a garage, and he didn't want to go into the details because it was a restroom, and he ended up looking around and seeing this can of Lysol, and the can of Lysol had this green like paint on it, color. If you've ever seen Lysol, it's like this green, dark green kind of thing, and it had to do with eradicating foul odors. So he associated the green and the foul odors with Lord Fowl, the Lord Fowl's bane and everything, and all of this. It became this spark. That can of Lysol became the spark for the entire series of Thomas Covenant, the Unbeliever, 6 books. And just seeing a can of Lysol is what it took. And that's the same thing here, where all I saw, the vision, the picture that guy talked about, having a picture to make something real, it was seeing this picture that made this entire discussion that I'm having with you today real. And there's others that are out there, I was thinking, almost all of these brilliant authors and these concepts came out of the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, where we were having this incredible proliferation of ideas and intelligence and engineering feats. I mean, we made it to the moon in the 60s. All of the things that were happening back then, the excitement of that period of time, we're there right now. We're in the same place. And I bring up these other books because I wanted to talk about the future, not just the past. And this Project Hail Mary is like a first contact story, just like the Mote in God's Eye with these Motis is a first contact story. But the first contact is this guy using his human intelligence to help some other creature with their problem in their solar system or wherever it was, to save their world. And ultimately those same people, those same sentient beings maybe help us in the future at some point. And then The quantum thief, because I have a cybersecurity background, this guy, he did the same thing, smashed a couple of ideas together, came up with the idea of saving memory, uploading memories into some kind of substrate, and then having some level of encryption in order to prevent corrupt. So as a cybersecurity person, I'm going to just tell you this 3 things that you use encryption for. You use it for what's called non-repudiation. Non-repudiation is to say, I am who I am, and I've got proof to prove it, right? So when I prove to you that I am who I am, I have to have a real de facto definitive proof, which is usually a token of some kind or a badge or an identity, like something that is proving you are who you say you are. And that's, there's no doubt that you are the individual identified. Now, everything you create, which is essentially using the key that you use to identify who you are, you can use that key to encrypt everything that you do, right? Every piece of writing that you have, every intellectual thing you channel into something is ultimately something you could encrypt using your identity key to get there. And so in the story, they say ultimately the encryption process is how we upload brains into a computer substrate so that in some day in the future, you could be brought out of that into another physical body and, eventually live multiple lives. And there's a whole bunch of stories that have a similar thread, all kind of similar in context. But in this one, he talks a lot about encryption and how when I want to communicate with you, it's all mental now. It's not, we talk verbally and everything, but which is really slow. But there's a mental connection where you could like share a whole idea with somebody in a split second. But you don't just blast it out into the ether as open text or open content. You have to share your public encryption key with who you want to send it to. And then they open the idea that you have and decrypt it. And they are able to see what you're saying. And you can share that with them. And then you could remove the key so that they don't keep it. Now they can record whatever they see, but they can't go back to the original and infect it and cause a problem. So it's a really, exact Terraceum. Very, very interesting. I haven't read into that one, so I'll have to look it up after we're done here. But anyways, this quantum thief, because I have an encryption cybersecurity background, I was fascinated by the quantum thief when I read it because he talks about the mechanics of having these keys that are associated with an identity, which is the body and the personhood that a person is. And then when they want to share anything, the key is the ultimate method of sharing. And then essentially what the I don't want to give away the plot twist, the storyline for that. But there's a deep, dark underbelly of the whole thing that if I share this one fact, it unwinds the whole story. So I'm not going to, but suffice it to say, it identifies corruption. It identifies how corruption can get into systems that are intended to be very, very discreet and secure. Now, this is going to matter in what I talk about tomorrow, because that's actually one of the key elements. And there's a pun going on there with the word key. But we'll talk more about that. And then, and the last thing I'm going to talk about today, you've heard me talk about this book, Accelerando. Now, Accelerando is the third book in a series, which I didn't know, and I'm going to have to go back and read the previous two now. But Accelerando is something that if you watch the folks over on Moonshots, the team over there, Alex, has been like just spouting off about Accelerando forever. Let's see. So if you have, I'm sure a lot of you may know who the heck these folks are, but let's just go to the videos because they'll have the four of them. There we are. So Dr. Alexander Wiesner-Gross, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. Peter Diamandis, Salim, and I'm not going to start
was
this.
the engine.
Get into it because we'll end up. I just want to go back to the intro. We don't have an intro. All right. I was looking for the thumbnail that I could look at. That there it is. So I could see Dave Blunden and Salam Ismail. So these four brilliant people. I admire them and follow them continuously on everything that I do because they're so. I listen to every word that they put out every week because they're so inspiring. And Alex he keeps talking about the Claudebot and also about the first chapter of Accelerando, which talks about sentient lobster or lobster brains that become sentient. And it's all just really interesting. It all kind of weaves together here. So that's one of those things that I'm going to go into Claudebot a little bit more tomorrow. So just to give you a sneak peek, I'm going to be doing some really deep dives into Claudebot, Moltbot, and OpenClaw, and talking about the positives and the negatives, where things, kind of how this is reflected in what's going on. And then Tuesday, I don't have the bookmarks in here yet, but I'm going to start talking about that compounding content. And I've got a bunch of things that I'm going to pull together to support that discussion. So I hope that I'm not like going into some kind of weird, crazy area that you are not interested in. But if you are interested in this stuff, I would absolutely love to do that. And I'm going to pull your email off the side there. Yeah, I definitely will. And but I want to. I don't want to give away too much of tomorrow either. So I'm going to pull the plug here today and say, we're done for now. But thank you again for joining me. I hope today was fun. I know that this is the weave. This is the, following the snake trail or the worm trail through the soil with all of these different ideas and different topics that I'm talking about. I'm hoping that what we can do in the times, in the concepts of what I'm talking about, that they merit thought, which is really, my perspective is inspiring you to think a little bit. I'm thinking like crazy. The more I do this, the more I'm finding myself, I dig into research that inspires me, and then seeing pathways through them and connections through them, just the same way that when you go back to this Kardashev scale, the more collecting of information that builds, it creates a feedback loop that generates greater intelligence or greater creativity, is like that Kardashev scale where one layer of earth, we can't destroy the foundation to reach that level. We wouldn't want to. But when we get to level 2, we start jumping into level 2 and we pull a thread from level 2 down to level 1. We ignite the power of level 1 and ignite then our growth into the level 2 of the Kardashev scale, which eventually could lead us to things like building a ring world, having a gas torus that we could survive in, taking trees into orbit and creating spaceships out of them. All of these things come from smashing ideas together and then seeing what comes out. And when you see things like Accelerando, one of the biggest reasons Alex Wiesner Gross is talking about that is because he's saying, when you smash these ideas together that are in our real world and we reach a certain level with them, everything that we're seeing resembles science fiction. It resembles the picture we put in our head. Like I said right here at the beginning, it's the picture we put in our head and allowed ourselves to imagine and extrapolate against that gave us the vision to go into the next level. So that's, sorry, it is a little bit Trumpy. I call it, I'm stealing his concept there, but I look at it sort of like comedy too, because he calls it the weave, but it's really a callback. It's a comedy. If you have ever done improv, I took my niece when she was in high school. I used to bring her up into LA and we both went to an improv class. And the improv class was all focused on bouncing off of other people constantly and allowing that to happen. And one of the key things about comedy is you build up and build up and build up and build up. And as you're building a more and more absurd reality that when you do a callback to the very beginning, you introduce this one topic at the beginning that was not absurd when you introduced it. But now in light of everything you just talked about and you bring it back, the absurdity of it becomes obvious, and it's a humorous thing. And that's kind of, it doesn't have to be absurd or comedy, but it's the same concept. You have these callbacks to the earlier stages. And that's kind of where I'm calling back to all of these previous authors, these previous inventors and scientists and things like that. And the yes and. I love the yes and. That's it. And basically what it says is exactly what happens, why I don't end right on time, is because I go, well, there was this topic and this topic and it's I can't stop it sometimes. It's like when I hear somebody say something, I get an and in my head instantly, and it goes to the next topic, and I can't, So, but the only way to bring this to an end is to say yes, but, and yes, but we all have to get on with something else in our day. So let's take our cups, have the second sip at the end of our time today. And I bid you a great day. Cheers. And I will talk to you again tomorrow, and we will yes and through that conversation. Cheers.